you, Scott, for that very kind introduction. And thank you, Danny, for not only your words this morning, but for your leadership here in this community, for your support for the free enterprise system, and frankly, for being a great partner for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. It is important, it is critical for the Chamber to have partners like Danny all across the country if we're to generate the kind of change we need, if we're to generate the leadership we need, the political and economic leadership for this country to get back on its feet and going again. So again, thank you, Scott and Danny. Let me talk a little bit about the U.S. Chamber and where we are and what we do. And I'd like to spend a few minutes on how I see the world shaping up in Washington over the next year or so, and why making the case for free enterprise, why talking about why business is important, why business is the answer and not the problem, is not only important for the U.S. Chamber and for state and local chambers around the country, but for you as individuals. The U.S. Chamber, as you may or may not know, has been around just about 100 years. 2012 will be our 100th anniversary, and we are the voice of business in Washington. We have been there through recessions and expansions and wars, but us in our historic building across the square from the White House, we've always been there to say why free enterprise is important. Again, why business is the answer and not the problem. And frankly, we feel that we're needed now more than ever. This is a historic moment for the Chamber where we have to fulfill a historic role. We have 300,000 members, companies of all sizes across the country. A number of those members are themselves state and local chambers, and so ultimately we represent almost 3 million businesses across the country. We view making the argument for free enterprise, making the argument for businesses as a sacred duty. And it is not one we take lightly. And it is certainly one where we need as much help as we can get. We entered into this political environment in an unusual situation. It was common historically, actually, for our members to be happy when Congress didn't do anything. Gridlock is good. The less comes out of Washington, the better. We actually entered into this political season with a number of our members saying, this is a time where we need some federal action. We have problems. We have economic problems. Healthcare costs are out of control. Infrastructure, education, trade, taxes. There are actually some domestic economic things in which we need some strong, smart political leadership. We need some answers out of Washington. Unfortunately, that political environment that we entered into, and frankly some of our members entered into with some hope, has turned against us. We is a political environment now in which people consistently make the case that business is the problem, not the answer. That business is the enemy of the people. And frankly, if you do polling of individuals, people who are anxious, worried, business isn't particularly popular right now. People feel anxious about the future. Interestingly, if you looked at some of the polling and focus groups, it would scare you. Frankly, we'd have to start the cocktail party a little earlier than normal if I showed you what some of the polling shows. We have particularly young people, their ignorance and misunderstanding about free enterprise and business is astounding. We have quotes from people to the extent of, capitalism, yeah, that's what North Korea does. Russia, that's what capitalism is all about. If you poll isms, capitalism, socialism, communism, the worst performing ism, particularly among young people, is capitalism. Sounds mean, don't like it. Socialism, that sounds comforting. We have done a poor job, frankly, as business leaders and as community leaders in educating the public, and particularly young people, about the role of free enterprise and business in our society. And so how has that infected the legislative outlook, if you will, and the political outlook in Washington? Again, we entered into this political environment with some hope. Our members have been talking about healthcare reform for decades. And it routinely polls as the #1 issue for business. And so again, the president took an initiative to move into the healthcare space, and what did we get? We got the double down theory of healthcare reform. Let's take the most expensive healthcare system in the world, and let's fix it by making it a whole lot more expensive. Frankly, the reason why those bills have run aground, if you will, is that for a number of people in the country, business in particular, they don't offer anything. There's no promise of getting healthcare costs under control. It's more taxes, more regulation, more of what we don't need. Card check legislation. The chamber has been at the forefront of pushing against a ridiculous piece of legislation, which, by the way, people don't understand, has passed the House of Representatives at least twice, and is sitting with the U.S. Senate, and balances on a very precarious few votes. I mean, there are a few conservative Democratic senators that control the fate of card check at the moment. And that legislation, as you sure know, would not only allow for organizing folks just by signing a card, no secret ballot, but just sign a card in a parking lot or at home or wherever anybody can threaten you. But also, if you don't come to an agreement with the union within a very short period of time, a federal arbitrator can come in and impose a contract on your business. And that's not just wages, that's benefits, work rules, the whole deal. I mean, this is just a really bad and really dumb piece of legislation. But it was, at the top of the organized labor agenda. The president just the other day mentioned that he may try to incorporate it in a jobs bill, so keep it out of a standalone piece of legislation that can be beat and roll it into a jobs bill. We're going to have to be fighting that every day of the week. But why do we need to be fighting that piece of legislation when we should be focusing on jobs? So again, the political environment is not at all conducive to getting our economy back on track. Financial market reform needed, absolutely. We've been talking about smart financial regulatory reform for years, well before the meltdown in 2007-2008. But what's proposed? The Consumer Financial Product Safety Commission. If you don't know about this, you've got to learn about it. This is a new regulator that would purport to regulate any company or business that has a credit interaction with a customer. So it's not just banks, it's car dealers, furniture dealers. Anybody who has a credit relationship with a customer could be regulated by this new entity. And in our view is, listen, the problem in this space was not a lack of regulators. There are too many regulators. We don't need yet another Uber regulator for the entire economy. We need smart regulation. We need good consumer protection. But the answer can't always be, let's have a new federal bureaucracy. That's not going to create jobs. Energy and climate discussions. I mean, again, energy security is critically important, not only for our national security, but for our future prosperity. But starting with, let's increase the cost on the entire economy is not the way to focus on job creation. It's not the way to get this economy back on track. There's been a lot of press about how the climate change legislation probably isn't going to move quickly in the Senate. And that's probably true. But you also have to understand that a few weeks ago, the EPA finalized an endangerment finding, they call it. The EPA is moving to regulate carbon emissions across the entire economy, whether Congress acts or not. As a matter of fact, it's a threat to Congress. It's a sword of Damocles over Congress, saying if you don't act, we, the EPA, will regulate carbon across the entire economy under the Clean Air Act. That's a really, really bad idea. That's bad for this community. It's bad for communities across the country, most particularly because, one, the EPA is not going to be good at regulating every carbon emission across the country. And B, it just adds to this growing uncertainty among business. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen in healthcare, labor regulation.